Hello, I'm Michael Embry, Marketing Chair of the Kentucky Book Fair, and welcome to the first of 4 programs we have featuring the 33rd Kentucky Book Fair. It's going to be held November 15th at the Frankfort Convention Center, the hours from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Now we'll have symposiums and readings. More than 150 authors will be there. They'll be there to discuss their books, sign their books, and some will be reading from their books. So it's going to be a fun day for the family. It's one of the signature events in Kentucky, and people from all over the region come here for the book fair. Nearly 4,000 people will, book patrons will be here to meet their authors and just turn it to a fun day. Proceeds from the book fair go to public and school libraries, as well as literacy programs. And over the past 33 years, we have provided nearly $370,000 to benefit children and adults throughout the Commonwealth. So it's a very worthwhile program. The book fair will have face paintings and stuff for children as well. And that brings me to the point that the book fair actually, in a way, kind of starts on Friday, November the 14th, with the 4th Annual Children's Day. There will be about 35 authors there, and school kids from all over the area will be there to attend that. Authors such as George Ella Lyon, Debbie Daddy, and several others will be there for readings, and they'll do drawings and all sorts of things. So it's a fun day for kids, and that runs from 9 o'clock until 2 o'clock. So it's mark your calendar on that. And I want to mention one other thing, that it's all free, except for the books. And of course, the books you buy, the proceeds benefit libraries and literacy programs. And among the 150 authors we'll have this year, 3 of them are here today. We have Walt Reichert, Wanda Luttrell, and Richard Taylor, and thank you for being here.
Sure, happy to be here.
And Walter, let's start with you. What book do you have?
My first book is called Walt's Wisdom, a Kentucky Cornucopia of Gardening Miscellany. And it's a collection of about 86 of the columns that I've written for Kentucky Monthly Magazine over the last 14 years.
Uh-huh.
And the columns cover, they're primarily gardening advice, covering everything from perennials to shrubs to vegetables to trees to gardening for birds and bees and butterflies and so on.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering, see, it covers 14 years of writing columns at Kentucky Monthly.
Yeah, I think you got me started. You got me started on this.
Back when we were young men.
Something like that. Yeah.
Right.
Closer to being young, anyway.
How difficult was it to go through? And I mean, that's a lot of columns to pick out the 85. Did your wife or somebody help you go through all this? Or?
No, I pretty much did it myself. There were about, I think about 125 columns altogether. Mm-hmm. And so I picked, of course, what I thought were the best of the columns. And, mm-hmm. and some of them had some, material that would repeat. So, of course, those went out. And then after we got done picking out the 80 or so that I thought were the best, I went through each column and updated them, added some information. Didn't exactly change the columns, but for example, some of the columns there would be new varieties of flowers that have been introduced mm-hmm. since 10 years ago or whatever. And so I would add that information, sometimes just little tips, even a recipe or two, something like that in the column itself, without actually changing the column.
Uh-huh. Now this is your first book?
First book, written millions of words for magazines and newspapers, but mm-hmm. it's kind of neat to see them all between the covers of a book rather than a magazine or newspaper.
Well, I can imagine. It's I'm looking at your background. You were what, a college teacher at one time?
Yeah, I taught college English at University of Louisville, Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. Actually, I was a newspaper man for 10 years, but my first and longest career was actually a college teacher, and lots of folks know me in Shelby County, but they don't know that about me, that I was a college teacher for a long time before I did something else.
Okay, and you live in Simpsonville now?
I live in Simpsonville in Shelby County, that's right.
And reading over your book, I understand that it's more than just. I mean, there's humor in some of the columns, and it's light in places and deep in places, I guess.
Well, so much garden writing is so somber. I mean, it's do this, put that color with that color, and don't even think about putting pink with purple, and so on and so on. And it just, I mean, if we can't have fun with this, we may as well be driving trucks. We, do something. Gardening ought to be fun, and there is a lot of humor. That's my personality, and sometimes folks don't get my humor, but it's in there nevertheless. Yeah.
Well, I think you mentioned that it's inspiration with some perspiration.
A little bit of perspiration. Well, actually a lot of perspiration. But, I work with a cooperative extension service now in Shelby County. I'm the horticulture technician, and there's a lot of enormous interest in gardening, and especially food gardening right now, and not a lot of knowledge to go along with that interest. So there is a lot of advice and a lot of advice to give, and I teach classes at the extension office, and especially the food gardening classes are enormously popular. And so I'm not going to tell you I'm going to get you out of work, but I'll let you work smart. Is what I'm hoping to do.
Well, I guess over the many years you've been writing these columns and for newspapers, has there been a growth in gardening? I mean, more people involved in it?
I don't know if there are more people involved in it. What is interesting is how the interest shifts from back when I first started. There was a lot of interest in food gardening. That kind of went away for a while, and kind of interest in perennials and herbs. Then there was a shift toward interest in shrubs and trees, and that, especially interest in trees, happily is still there. But back again to food gardening. I think I tie a lot of it to the local food, eating local, eating close to home. Nothing more local than your own backyard or patio. And so there's a lot of interest in that. There's a lot of interest in growing your own fruit. That's something that's really, really come on. And I get a lot of questions. Why doesn't my peach tree have beautiful ripe peaches on it? And
I guess organic foods and things like that kind of factor into it as well, don't they?
Growing food organically is very popular. It's just not as easy as throwing the seeds in the ground and letting nature take its course. And a lot of people get discouraged when it doesn't work. Growing food organically is probably more difficult. In Kentucky, is more difficult than just trying to grow it using every spray known to mankind. And several of my columns touch on that, trying to hold back on the sprays, leave them on the shelf, and have them ready if you need them, but don't use them if you don't need them.
All right. Is it now? Have you ever attended a book fair?
Attended book fairs most years. This will be the first time I'm on the other side of the counter, but yeah.
You excited about it?
Oh yeah. Oh heck yeah. Yeah. It's going to be really fun to be there on the other side. Yeah. That'll be fabulous.
Yeah. One thing I've always enjoyed when I was there as an author was just meeting the other authors and just stuff like networking and things like that. So.
Yeah. It's I think it's a lot of people's dream to write a book, and it's neat to see what other people do with their writing, and I'm looking forward to that. Really looking forward to that.
One other thing, you got another book planned?
Well, I've got to do another 14 years of columns first.
Let's see here in 14 years then.
Hopefully not quite that long.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Walt.
All right, thanks.
And our next guest is Wanda Luttrell, and I understand you're the queen of Christian mysteries. Is that right?
Suspense, I think they say.
Pardon?
Suspense.
Suspense. Okay.
I did not give myself that title.
Oh, okay. Now, what book? Do you have a new release now? What is it called?
It's called House at Devil's Bend.
Okay.
It takes place on the Kentucky River. The back cover begins, Great Aunt Emmeline died with a secret. Now someone has to pay the devil his due. And Great Aunt Emmeline's namesake and great niece, Emma, is a young widow who inherits this moldy old mansion on the river. And she soon finds out why it's called the Devil's Bend, the House of Devil's Bend. she begins to have dreams of Civil War characters that come in and out of the house, and a little slave girl who wants something from her. She doesn't know what. Then she becomes involved with two men, an intriguing realtor and a very attractive antique dealer. And she's thinking about selling the house, and so she needs a realtor. And she has many, many antiques to sell, so she needs an antique dealer. But it's mainly a ghost story, demon story. Okay. Do I believe in ghosts? Not really, not as such.
Right.
But I've had several books written along this line, and editors seem to like it. My agent encouraged it, so that's how it came about.
Now, I understand you're going to have a Christmas book?
Yes, I have another one that's come out about the same time. It's The Season for Miracles.
Season for Miracles.
The Season for Miracles. And it's about a Jewish widow, Lydia Steinberg, who's had a little antiques boutique on a little southern town mall. Mm-hmm. You may recognize the cover. By the way, my covers were done by my daughter, Jennifer Luttrell. Okay. She took the photographs. And this is the downtown Frankfort Mall at night. But Lydia has been there for 50 years. Her husband has passed away. She's still running the boutique because it brings in money. And that brings in the most money that she makes during the year. So she continues to do it. She really cares not much about Christmas because she's Jewish.
Yeah.
But as time goes on, Lydia begins to experience miracles that are taking place in her shop. And she doesn't really believe in miracles. But her husband is a little different. He's always believed in the miracles, and which they call an escadole. And she said, I've never seen a miracle, but she hears voices in her shop, and there's nobody there but her and the cat. So I've never seen a miracle, and she hears in the voice, she hears, but you didn't believe in them until this season, the Season for Miracles.
Now, Wanda, are you from Frankfort?
Yes.
Lived here all your life, or
yes,
most of your life? And
pretty much.
Yeah, you written 16 books?
I kind of lost count. I think that's about right.
And you've various genres as well?
Yes, I have. I have about 6 or 7 that are middle grades level, and then I have a Kentucky history textbook and teacher's guide and activity book that my stepmother and I did together. She did the artwork and I did the writing. Several of them are novels and suspense and that sort of thing.
I understand some have been translated into French, Danish, and German. So,
I was surprised by the Danish. I would have thought it would have been Spanish, but they did Danish, and I was talking to Liz Taylor down at the Poor Richard's bookstore about that, and she said she had lived in Denmark, and that the reason for that was they were so interested in slavery, and those books dealt with that topic.
Now, do you have any other books planned, or?
I have one written, but I want to go back and do some other things to it before I release that one.
When was your first book published?
Oh, let's see. It was called The House of Eleanor Garland. It was a ghost story, and it was late 70s.
Late 70s. So you've been pretty prolific then over the years.
I've been writing a long time. I hadn't done much for the last 7 or 8 years. I had 3 that I had written. My agent wasn't able to place them. He kept trying, but this one, for example, they told him it was too Jewish for a Christian publisher. Mainly we dealt with Christian publishers. So I don't know where that came from. I mean, I figured that Christianity came from Judaism, but
Right.
So this one we did on Create Space. But I've done a couple of Christmas books, and I like to write about Christmas, and so I think that's why they were well received.
Now, is it safe to assume you've attended book fairs?
A long time ago, yeah, several years ago. I mean, I've attended them as a patron many times, but as an author, it's been 7 or 8 years.
What do you think about the book fair?
Oh, I love it. It's fun. See a lot of old friends and meet new friends.
It's always it's kind of a reunion almost, just getting together and seeing some of the folks. And but we're all looking forward to November 15th. So Wanda, thank you for being here. And our next guest is Richard Taylor. Welcome, Richard.
Right. Happy to be here, Mike.
And book of poetry.
Book of poetry this time, yes.
And what's the title?
Rain Shadow is the name of it, and Rain Shadow is I learned this, of course, before I wrote the book, but it's a meteorological term, and it has to do with, in mountain ranges, water off the sea meets cool air in the mountains and causes condensation, so that as a result, one side of the mountain is completely lush, the other is completely desiccated, almost desert-like.
Uh-huh.
And so I use that as a sort of metaphor for the collection.
The collection itself, what does it range from?
I guess these are poems written over the last 2 or 3 years, and many of them are, gosh, I guess sort of, I try to make them thoughtful poems, raising questions about life and death, living and loving.
Uh-huh. Now, I know you've written, what, fiction and nonfiction?
I've written a couple of novels and 3 or 4 nonfiction books, mostly relating to Kentucky history.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no idea which number this is with poetry. It's probably about 9 or 10.
Okay. I guess the approach is different to do a book of poetry then, isn't it? I mean, it's just you kind of collect them, and then when you think you're ready.
Yeah, although I've done some works that were more thematically unified. I'm working right now, for example, on a book, a collection of poems, sonnets about the life of Cassius Marcellus Clay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's much easier if you have a kind of, a topic, someone's life provides a natural timeline for you. But with these poems, I find many of them are connected, but many of them grow out of experiences. Most of them are probably narrative poems, and they suit my schedule more because I'm still teaching, and except for summers, I write poems pretty much on the run.
Mm-hmm.
And so that people with my short attention span, it helps to write the right poems. You can work with it a week or two and maybe come back to it later, but then it's done. And as Wanda, I'm sure, would tell you, that working with a novel, sometimes it's a long haul. And so I admire those who can sit down, who have the time too, to sit down and write a full-length work. And I admired particularly what I heard you say, Walt, about writing, a compilation of articles. I think that's great.
I think I guess it's supposed to be humorous, but they say a misplaced comma will drive a poet nuts. Is that true?
That's true. Well, it doesn't trouble the poets so much as it does the English teachers, and I happen to wear both hats. I've been grading papers this morning and noted more than one misplaced comma.
Right.
I bet.
Yeah, it's a bad habit. It's a failing of English teachers.
Our listeners, I would think they would know that Richard's a former poet laureate of Kentucky. I think 2001 or 2000.
Yeah, right. 1999 to 2001.
Okay, and a longtime professor at Kentucky State University,
right.
And a keen writer.
Keenan visiting writer at Transylvania. This is my 6th year there.
6th year.
Yeah.
And I guess you never get teaching out of your blood then.
I love to teach, and I know I have to stop at some point, and probably sooner rather than later. But right now, it's going well, and I enjoy doing it. I enjoy working with young minds,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly students who, I've had a lot of good students at KSU, but I have a greater concentration of good students at Transy, and it's a joy working with students who bring a lot to the game and who are really excited about learning. And I find that kind of atmosphere at Transylvania.
Mm-hmm. And Richard's also the co-owner of Port Richard's Bookstore on Main Street, and that's been there for how long?
Since 1981, we've been on Broadway. In fact, when we moved on to Broadway, Bill Crumble and his wife opened the Tin Ceiling, and Ellen Glasgow around the corner opened her art gallery. But at that time, there weren't any businesses really in our block of Broadway. And so I think a lot of changes have come since then, and really positive changes as far as I'm concerned. But my connection with the bookstore is pretty flat. I'm sort of absent a lot of the time because of my other duties, and we say the place tends to prosper to the extent that I'm not connected with it. And there are others who will say there's a lot of truth in that.
Really?
I'm not a business person.
Do you sense that people are appreciating poetry more now? It seemed like it kind of fell out of favor.
That's a good question, and I don't pretend to have the answer to it. I think the people who read poetry most are perhaps other poets, and I know I try to keep up with 15 or 20 poets, as well as those around me I know who write. From working in a writing group at one time, I keep up with those, with my colleagues writing. But as for general reading, there's such an enormous variety of poetry being written today. It seems like more and more of it is published, but I'm not sure that the sales are so big. I doubt